Good morning and welcome to this month's episode of Inspiring Careers, when today we are in the presence of one of the most respected cricketing coaches in the world. Alan Campbell, welcome to Inspiring Careers.
Thanks, John. Great to be here, mate.
So listen, and I've got to know you over the last couple of years and very much enjoyed your company. You've coached some wonderful people in the world of cricket. You've developed them, you've mentored them, etc. What about you? I mean, is your career important to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's an artist by the name of Picasso who once said, "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away."
Yes.
Somehow I fell into teaching, which is giving, and somehow I fell into coaching. From teaching, I went into coaching. So I feel like I'm a person who likes to give, support, help, and I can do that through what I've done through teaching, and then my career in coaching. So it is important to me to be able to do that.
Well, that's interesting, because did you go to which uni? Did you go to Sydney Uni originally? Which uni did you go to?
I came down from a little town called Inverell, which is on the far northwest of New South Wales, to make a name for myself. And I went to Sydney University to do a Bachelor of Education in Physical Education.
Yes.
So that was a 4-year course back in the day.
Yeah. So you started off as a school teacher.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
How, therefore, did you get involved in what I call, high performance coaching? Was that just initially coaching kids in different clubs, etc.?
No, what happened was that, as a teacher,
yes.
I mean, back in the day, cricket wasn't professional, so you had to have a job.
Yeah.
So I'd work during the day at Des Moines Boys High School at that stage, and I was in the New South Wales State squad, which was which would train at the SCG. So immediately after school, you'd go to the SCG and you'd train, and then you'd come home and so forth. And that's how it was. But there was a guy by the name of Peter Spence who was the New South Wales State Director of Coaching, and he suggested that I do a level 1 coaching certificate, which I did, which went hand in hand with coaching. So he recognised something in me that then provided me with the opportunity to move into coaching. So I did some more qualifications. He got me involved in some programs. I was looking after one of the junior Metro squads. I was looking after some state under 16 team at one stage, just not running them, but just helping, if you know what I mean. So, and then that led towards the end of my playing career, to be invited by New South Wales Cricket to work with Bill Anderson. Now, Bill Anderson was a rugby league coach, but actually a very good cricketer. And Bill was also the coach of the New South Wales team at that time. And he asked me to be his assistant, which is what I did. So I was an assistant coach to Bill for a short period of time. And then following on from that, other opportunities came up. I got involved in coach education, coaching other coaches. And I got involved in some New South Wales programs before I actually then went into work for New South Wales Cricket full time. Yeah.
So then this is fascinating for an Irish punter who is now getting a great appreciation for cricket. You joined New South Wales Cricket having been a good cricketer yourself.
Yeah.
So were you a chance of making the great excuse? Oh, that's a bit of a pun. Excuse me. Were you a good cricketer?
Well, I was good enough to be in the New South Wales squad. In those days, the main form of cricket was the Sydney grade competition.
Okay.
And so it was club v club, and from that, the New South Wales selectors picked what they called a New South Wales squad. Now, that squad would train together at the SCG twice a week generally, and then from that squad, they'd pick the team to represent New South Wales, and then those guys would get the opportunity to play for Australia. So I was good enough to be in the squad. I played some second 11 cricket and some minor representative stuff. I played with and against some of the best cricketers in the world. I stood behind at one stage, as a wicketkeeper batsman, I stood behind the great Steve Rickson, who was just an absolutely brilliant keeper. But we all worked together, and that's how it was. So I guess in today's terms, because in those days it was only, it wasn't professional really. You were invited to play for New South Wales and you were paid per match. You weren't contracted, which is an interesting. I remember one of my first games I played for, I'm just trying to think, it was a minor representative match. It was the SCG at number 2. And at the end of the game, the secretary of the association, which might have been Brian Hughes at that time, came up and gave me an envelope. And I thought, that's interesting. So I didn't obviously open it then, but when I got to my car, I thought, I'll just have a check. It must be a thank you for coming, or, there's another game coming up. But I opened it up and it was a check. It was a check for $8.
Was it really
for playing
$8?
2
That's
days,
incredible. Yeah.
So 2 days. But by today's standards, I would think that because it's more professional and more opportunities, there's a state team, there's the Australian team, there's T20 cricket, there's one-day cricket. I probably would fit into a category of people that would be around about that level, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Did you feel, therefore, as your cricket career was evolving, were you thinking, I'm a better coach than I'm a player? Were you always thinking I'm going to become a coach because of your teaching background?
No, not initially. Initially, I wanted to do my best as a player. And then as my playing career, I think I stopped playing when I was about 34 or something. I played for New South Wales second 11 when I was 32, which was
you're a young kid at that stage.
And I actually, talking about myself here, which I'm not comfortable doing, but I actually started to play some really good cricket when I moved clubs, and I moved to a club called Randwick, and Randwick had some more senior players. Alan Turner was a good mentor there, and Ronnie Crippen, and they'd played for Australia and Australia Ace, and that's when I just got married, and I had a new purpose in my life, and it was all about getting better. So I started to play some really good cricket, but I was 27 years of age, and Steve obviously was pretty entrenched, and there was some young blokes coming through, and then I was offered an opportunity to work with a development squad in New South Wales, and this is with Bill Anderson and Peter Spence and so forth. And the development squad had young blokes in it like Steve Waugh and Mark Waugh and these sort of guys, and they were young guys. So I took that and stopped playing. And then from there, I worked a little bit with Bill with the state team for a year, and Dirk Wellham was the captain, and we had a really fine bunch of players. That was fun for a little while. So that's at that stage of my career, I thought that's when I started to think, I'm getting older. My chances of playing, high level cricket or higher level of cricket are diminishing, and yes, the opportunities were in coaching. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, hey. You joined Cricket New South Wales and you're there for 20 years, right?
Yep.
I mean, is this a period when all sports globally are becoming professional and therefore you guys are looking over your shoulder? I'm curious as to how cricket started to become professional. Did you have discussions with the lads there who were the leadership team and they wanted you to start bringing innovation to the table, for example?
Well, it was old-fashioned administration, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about from an administration point of view, it was fairly sedentary. In other words, It's settled. We do the same thing year in, year out. There were some great people there. My boss at the time, Bob Bradford, was brilliant, and Ross Turner was there. Some really, really, really good people. And so that was there. But I have this thing in my mind about unless you change how you are, you'll always have what you got. So I could see that there was going to be opportunity. They didn't necessarily press for change. I started to press for change. From a playing point of view, it was really, as I said, it was non-professional. You'd go to the cricket ground, you'd wear your own clothing. We weren't sponsored. When I say that, we didn't have sponsored clothing. There was no coaches at that time. You just signed your name as you went through the gate, and then it sort of worked itself out, all right? And I remember one of the first times when we got sponsored by Tui's. Right?
Okay, yeah.
I think Steve, I don't know whether it was Steve, because we worked for Tui's, Steve Rickson, that is, worked for Tui's, but I remember arriving with this big bag of Tui's T-shirts, and nothing was really said, but people just started taking these T-shirts out. I thought, am I supposed to have one? Anyhow, I got a couple of T-shirts, and that's what we wore to training. So from that point of view, so it was up until around about the Packer Revolution.
Yes.
Where that really, set the cat amongst the pigeons. That really upset the traditional believers of cricket. It split friends, associations. People weren't talking to each other. And there was the old guard, I'll never watch night cricket and I'll never do that. But then there was this new opportunity, for all those young players, at that time, the Chappells and the Dennis Lilly and these guys. And so that opened up a whole new area where people actually started, getting paid. So going back to my era or pre that era, as I said, you never got paid, and there was no fitness component associated with training in those days. So, but I was pretty fit myself because I was a phys ed teacher and I looked after myself. But I remember Doug Walters, the great Doug Walters, you know, one of my heroes, just a great player. And Peter Spence, who was the state director of coaching, that was starting to introduce all these new things to training. And everybody's thinking, what the hell? You know, what's this guy doing? You know, like, and he introduced fitness, right? And I remember Doug Walters, not, you know, because Doug liked to drink and he liked to have a smoke and all that sort of stuff. And so his training sessions, he'd hit thousands of balls. You know, he's a hard worker, don't get me wrong. But there was always an element of, you know, going to the bar after training and so forth. But I remember him saying at the time, in relation to these new innovations about fitness and running, because they used to make us run around Centennial Park, stuff like that. It wasn't specific. And he said, doesn't matter, he said, if the ball pitches leg and takes off, doesn't matter how fit you are. And he's right, because it deviates and so forth. But see, then Mr. Packer came on board and it was a revolution and he took over and he employed fitness people.
Did he really?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he, you know, it was a television image.
Yes.
You know, and you know what we see now is, you know, what we see on television is just brilliant. You know, the guys are fit. You know, they're athletes, and he employed a, you know, fitness guy, and blokes that generation. I'll use Doug, and you know, he's a terrific bloke. Don't make me wrong. I'm not trying to disparage him here at all, but he had to do it. He had to do that. That was what happened. So that was the beginning of the revolution. I came on board at New South Wales Cricket a little bit after that. So I was looking for opportunities. Once I was in at New South Wales Cricket as initially the state director of coaching.
Yes.
And I was running programs that they, you know, had traditionally done. But I was always questioning myself about how we could improve things. So that's where the element of change comes in. Why do we do things the way we've done things for so much time? And there's an opportunity here to make some real impact. So there was still resistance to change. Don't get me wrong, even though there were some fantastic people there. And the resistance to change was generally along the lines of, you know, if I went to Bob Radford, for example, I said, Bob, you know, how about we look at things this way, or how about we introduce this? And he'd say, he said, why do we need to do that? He said, Bradman never needed that.
Yes.
So it was the Bradman effect.
Yes.
So that was what you had to battle, right? The Bradman effect. We've always produced all these great players. But at one point in time, New South Wales was languishing. They went for 17 years, I think, without winning the Shield. But we always had great players. We always had a big name, the biggest, best in, you know, I think that was it the best state, county, province in world cricket. But we were sort of languishing a little bit. So I was looking for opportunities within my sphere to do things quite differently.
Yes, yeah. And it's interesting because we will talk about your corporate career in terms of coaching people, but how many times you hear in the corporate world, why do we need to change? We've always done it that way.
Yeah.
So you're in there actually looking at different, from your own perspective, A, how did you influence the change? And B, what about research? How did you work out what, you know, did you look globally? I'm just curious as where you were looking for new, how did you influence the change and bring the innovation in?
No, well, looking at change, so you've got to ask yourself some questions. You know, why do we do this? What can we do better? Blah, blah, blah. So I started to look at different opportunities within sport. So talk to the Waratahs, talk to rugby league coaches, talk to, other sports and so forth. But around about that time, there was a big conference in the UK called Cricket Live, run by Channel 4, and that's the first time I met Mark Nicholas, the great commentator.
Oh, yes, yeah.
He ran it.
Okay.
So I went to Bob and said, my boss at the time had said, you know, I'd like to go to this. What do you know? Yeah, he actually said, yes, that's right. Yes. But other people within the organisation said, what do you need to go there for? You know, we're New South Wales Cricket. What can you learn from the Poms? You know, so I went. It was 2,000. It was great. It's called Cricket Live, I think it was. 2,000 people from all over the world there. 2,000 people. And from what I could identify, there were 2 Australian coaches, myself and one guy from Victoria. Some of the presenters were Australian. You know, Rod Marsh was working at the academy over there at the time, and I think Ian Healy did a session and so forth. But while I was there, you know, I met some fantastic people that were working for the ECB, friends that are still, people that are friends now today. You know, Gordon Lord, for example, Paul Farbrace, you know, Toby Radford. These blokes were working within the industry, and they'd set up this strategic plan because the ECB had gone under this review. And they came up with this 7-year plan. And it was all about beating Australia and winning the Ashes. And they did it 2 years earlier. That was I think it was 2005. But these people were doing stuff that I just went, whoa, we're way off the pace here. And I came back and reported that to New South Wales Cricket. And at the same time, I managed to, when I say I mean we. I had a team of people at the time that were just revolutionary. But we established a link with NSWIS, which was the New South Wales Institute of Sport. New South Wales Institute of Sport was set up to help sports leading up to the Olympic Games in Sydney. And after that, what was their purpose? So we'd worked with them previously. That's where I first met Troy Baker, one of the greatest sports analysts in cricket. And we'd worked with them. And so we set up this arrangement. And, all of a sudden, we weren't just working with cricket coaches who were doing the same thing day in, day out. We're working with and being around Olympic coaches, people are working on a global scale. Their mindset was different, right? So that elevated, that association took us from, I won't say, we weren't a kitchen table operation, but in comparison we may have been. So it took us from where we were then to looking globally about what's best practice in our industry, right? And I still had a little bit of pushback from people at the association, but I'll call it my team, the people working in that high performance department at the time, were just magnificent. We bought into it. We were doing stuff that, was revolutionary in cricket. Our video performance analysis was going through the roof. Troy Baker was live coding. So in those days, you used to code matches and you'd send it off somewhere and, people would send you the stuff back. He was live coding. So we had 2 screens set up. Michael Clark was in the Colts program at the time. He'd come off and he'd be able to see how he got out straight away, if he was interested. And I also remember that when we started to look into India, and we'll come to India in a minute, Troy was coding New South Wales matches. When I say New South Wales matches, I'll come to that, but he was coding live matches from his kitchen table and sending feedback. So we were doing some great stuff. Our training sessions changed. We were working on a 360 environment, which I talk about 9 years before it became 360. We were doing some terrific things in the training in nets, and we had fitness advisors and we had sports psychologists, because that always interests me. When I used to talk to players and even coaches, and there's great players that say cricket is 90% up here and 10% physically.
Okay.
And I used to think, okay, that's good. Why do we train 90% here in the nets and bowling and only 10%? And it was a no-no. But this whole thing opened up a whole new world. It was just magnificent. So that was our Colts program. So Brett Lee was in that Colts program. Michael Clark was in that Colts program. So they had that learnings, if you want to call it that, at that early stage. So the question in relation to that was, we did a lot of innovation because of those associations. We had a great team.
I'm going to ask you about your leadership skills, and then I'm very interested in the great track record you've had in helping women's cricket, both in Australia and globally.
Yeah.
You've had teams working. You're a very humble man. What sort of leader are you?
See, this is a really interesting question for me. And because I listen and watch and observe, and over the years, different leaders. So the way what I've come to is this: leadership is a people business. So it's almost like coaching. So as a coach, it's a people business. It's not necessarily about how you hold a bat or how you bowl a ball or whatever. It's more about the rapport you build with your staff or your talent. Okay. So my leadership style is to make certain that to set up an environment that is caring, to set up an environment where people can feel, to be who they want to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So setting up the environment is important. So you want people to thrive in that environment. So you want to support that people within that environment, the talent within. You want to grow the talent with that environment, provide them with the opportunity of study or, meeting, just expanding their knowledge. And you want people, I think but we go out our way to value our people within that environment. you had an assignment. You knew what the vision was. Okay, you knew what we're trying to do, right? This is your role. Okay, you take responsibility and you take ownership for that, and you'll be valued for that. But we want you to be in an environment where you're free to say what you want. You're free to criticise and be criticised. You're free to be safe, and that environment should also be such that. And this is what I tried to do, is to have people within that environment that would very rarely feel like leaving. They wanted to be part of it. So does that answer your question? So,
yeah, it's
so
very
leadership
good.
to me is not okay. We need to do this. I think we should do this. What do you think you should do? So my leadership style is more to listen and say less. That's right. So, and I learned also, if you don't mind me saying this, one last thing in relation to that. As a state selector, there was 5 state selectors in my time there at New South Wales Cricket, and my years there, I was under the chairmanship of a bloke by the name of Steve Bernard, who was just a great chairman, great guy, great chairman, terrific leader. And the way he used to run meetings was such that, the scenario was there, but we'd all sit around a table, it was like a circle, and he'd let other people speak first until it came back to him, right? So when it came to making a decision about who should be in the team or not be in the team, he already knew where it sat before it even got back to him. And, during that time, he never, because it'd be 5 people, and the chairman had the casting vote, right? In that time, he was there for like 10 years, and he was chairman for about 10, and I think I was chairman for about 4 or 5 after that. And I learned this off him. Let everybody else speak, right? And then if you have to make a decision, you make that decision. So during that time, you know how many decisions you had to make? I reckon I can think of 2, because he was that brilliant. So that's my way of, the way I like to do it. Listen and speak when I have to.
When you're doing that, and this is all new for me, and I'm loving listening to you because you're a proper business coach and leader, which is why you're so successful in the corporate world.
Thank you.
How do you set metrics?
Well,
is it annual? Is it every? I'm just curious as to how you can keep saying that you're achieving, if you like, or is it purely success on the pitch?
No, it's not purely success on the pitch.
Okay.
Right? What are my metrics in relation to a team? So there's individual development, obviously, within a team, so within your staff. So people are going from, doing a role to then adding value within different other roles, that sort of stuff. The metrics in relation to what we were doing was, how many national championships we won, right? So coming back to the playing side of things. So we established, once we went from that operation to this operation, we established a winning environment of 70% over 10 years. Right, so that was from where we were. New South Wales Cricket, everyone said, New South Wales Cricket, the dominant state, we win all the youth championships. It wasn't the case. When you actually go to the records, Victoria were in advance of us. They had more players, even though they're a smaller state. They were winning. Once we built this team and we had, gave people responsibility of managing and coaching teams, we lifted our winning rate to 70%. We did that over 10 years. Also, we increased our number of players in national teams to about 40%. All right. Our other metrics were in relation to, we managed to generate about $2 million worth of sponsorship, even though it wasn't really my role to do that. But because we were doing some unbelievable stuff, people wanted to get on board. People were sponsoring.
These are corporates that were coming to you.
Our vision was to do these things. We'll get to India in a minute, as you mentioned. As soon as we started to talk about that and we let people know that's what we do, then that was happening. Our other metrics were, our resources. What sort of resources do we have? We had NSWIS, but we also had we were doing research. We had about 7 or 8 projects from University, Sydney University, University of New South Wales, University of Technology. People wanted to be part. How many people wanted to be part of it? Initially, we had 0, then we got 10 people wanting to help us out here. So that's a metric also. The playing metrics, corporate metrics. We built the world's biggest indoor centre. When I say we, I'm talking about the whole organisation. But the initial dream occurred between Bob Radford, who was my original boss. He's one of my mentors. Just you clear, defined, keep it simple stuff. But no, I wouldn't. An old-fashioned boss. He'd never survive today. But I loved it, and he drew, and I know it's somewhere in the archives. He liked to drink, Bob. So he often had lots of people over after lunch and so forth like that. So Ross Turner, who was the development manager at that time, myself, and we're talking about this indoor cricket centre. And so he draws it on the bottom of a one of those things you put your glass on. What do you call them, buddy?
The coaster.
Yeah, the coaster.
Yeah.
So he's drawn it up on the coaster. That's what it was. And I know it's in the file that we had. So we built this world's largest indoor centre, 2,000 square metres of uninterrupted space, natural light, 13 lanes, biggest in the world. So that's the metric. We were running, when you talk about planning meetings, we'd lock ourselves away for a couple of days. We'd go to Bathurst and we'd just lock ourselves away and we'd question each other. How can we do this program better? Where can we take this? What's the world's best practice? What are they doing in England? So measured ourselves against that. But because we're involved, we're pretty well top of the tree. And the other thing was do you mind me talking about the people I had working there?
I'm delighted to hear you talking about them, yeah.
So Trevor Bayliss was part of this. Now, Trevor Bayliss was a former first-class player. He's won a World Cup. He moved on from us, for New South Wales. He won a World Cup with England, humble, but, just a brilliant coach, great people manager, and he's involved with our 19s program. He's the 19s program coach and the Colts coach. So those guys, Brett Lee, they had opportunity to work with him at an early age. David Patterson. Now, David Patterson's probably the most underrated coach in Australian cricket, but done a lot of work with Brett Lee and others, right? But he was an ideas man, and he'd come and sit in my office like, man, I got a couple of, he'd talk for, hours, but he loved cricket. David Patterson, 30 years at New South Wales Cricket, former first-class player, former selector, now left New South Wales Cricket in the last period of time. He looked after our 90s as well. He looked after he looked after the 90s when Trevor moved on. Trent Woodhill, came on board with the 17s. He's private coach to Steve Smith and David Warner, and he's worked internationally, has a global profile now in world cricket. We had Troy Baker, the person I mentioned before, that opened up this association with New South Wales Institute of Sport. We had Lisa Kitely, first woman to score a century at Lords. She was involved when we talk about the women's program. She was involved with that. Lisa Stalaker, who's got a global now, she was also one of our women's coaches working full time. We had Jackie Hoban, who's moved on from us to run international events for Soccer Australia Federation. Stephanie Jackson, who was one of the support people there. Didn't really say much, but every now and then go say something. You go, oh, thanks, Stephanie. And she was part of the team. So it was a very dynamic team. Very dynamic team.
I'm delighted that you've mentioned a couple of the girls because you're not giving yourself a plug here, but you were very instrumental in really taking the women's game to where it is now in Australia. What was the background there? Why did you feel there was a need and an opportunity to get women's cricket more professional, get it on the map, get it more innovative for the younger people? What was the background?
Well, a couple of things. And if you don't mind me going back a bit, when I was, a young coach, Peter Spence invited me to work with the New South Wales women's cricket team at that time. And I'm not certain whether they had a coach, but I did a couple of sessions with them. And it was unbelievably fantastic. These great people, great cricketers. I think Denise Annetts was around, Lindsay Reeler was around at the time. These just wonderful. And it sort of opened my eyes a little bit about, because at that time, women's cricket sat as an affiliate, so New South Wales Cricket, women's cricket, junior cricket, all sat off to the side. And then if you don't mind me telling this story, I was interviewed for a role at New South Wales Cricket once, right? And I went in and I'm being interviewed by the whole board, the New South Wales Cricket Board, the CEO and the chairman, the president, whatever. And things were going on along well. And then one gentleman asked me, he said, do you ever see the day where a woman cricketer could play in a men's team? And I thought to myself, what do I say here? You know, do I give them my answer as I understand it, or do I give them the answer they want? And I had to make a choice. And so I gave them the answer that I believed in. And of course, what I said has come to fruition. So, Alyssa Healy played for Barker College when she was at school. Ellyse Perry played Port of Grey cricket so they're men's teams.
Yes.
So suffice to say, I didn't get the role at that time. But moving on from there. So when we had a big revamp of our operation, we'd set the targets, we'd got the vision, we were looking for things to do, and women's cricket sat, as I said, off to the side. So I had a conversation with Christina Matthews, who was working at the organisation at that time, and she went on to become the CEO of the WACA, Western Australia. So she's had a great career in cricket, and we're just chatting about things. And because I used to talk to her, when you talk about, when you evaluate yourself and so forth, I had some people that I could go to and say, tell me what you're seeing. It's a really good way when you talk to people that you trust, and some of the mentors, which I hope we get onto as well at some point, tell me what you're seeing, And she said, one thing I remember, she said, you're entrepreneurial. I went, what? I'm entrepreneurial? Really? I see myself quite differently. Anyhow, I said, why don't we, because we had the men's program, and we had the boys, and what I call them emerging blues. So we'd identify boys at 12 and 13, put them in squads, 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s. And we had the 17s program, the 19s programs, Colts program, Sheffield Shield program. So it was about identifying and developing, monitoring young cricketers. So identifying, and then basically we're turning those guys into test cricketers. So, we know where Michael Clarke when he was 12 years of age. We knew where Philip Hughes was. We knew where, David Warner was, and they're coming through the system. And the idea is to provide them with an opportunity outside what they normally get from their club training session, to provide them, surround them with our high performance program, strength and conditioning, blah, 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 and great coaches, mentors, So we had 30 odd coaches that were involved in this program. We had 100 people involved in our system at the time who'd come in and, they'd coach and they'd talk. Like some people would just bring in and we'd say, I don't want you to, don't coach some technique. Don't say this is how you hold a bat, or don't talk to them about how you take wickets as a bowler. Spinners, talk to them about how you take wickets. So that was there for the boys, but there was nothing for the girls. The girls sat off to the side. So I said, okay, we need to do this. We need to convince the organisation that we need to do this. We need to provide the organisation with a solution. This is what we can do for women's
that's
cricket.
interesting. I'm enjoying listening to you immensely. It's such a learning curve for me. Were they resistant to change, and then I'll keep quiet?
Well, back in the day, there was a little bit of resistance from change,
Okay.
and not only from both sides to some degree. So, and I say that respectfully. So, but it was about, how do we do this? Who do we convince? And the board went along with it, thankfully, because they could see that there was an imbalance. And whilst the women's program still sat to the side, this became under our banner, the high performance banner. And so we had 12s, 13s, 14s, 15s, and that's where, we first came across Ellyse Perry and Alyssa Healy. So we came across that at 12 and 13 years of age, and they came right through the program, and we employed Lisa Kitely to manage that program. So she brought in other coaches, and then she moved on to other things, and Lisa Stalaker took over and kept it going. So it's been going to this day. So that gives me immense pride now to see
Brilliant.
what's going on, what's going on. So there's something unique, something I don't really talk about. So with that, with women's cricket then, and of course then we took, then we exposed the women's cricket, we took the women's cricket to India.
Yes. No,
which is part of
I am going to dine out in this because we're both fascinated by and obviously in the IT game, I'm lucky to deal with a lot of wonderful Indian gentlemen and ladies. Do you like India as a country?
I love India.
So give us a bit of you're going to get a free rein to tell us why you like India, how you get exposed to it, and your involvement specifically with Indian cricket.
Yeah, well, I was first exposed to Indian culture. My wife's from a place called Mauritius, and we went there, and it was a completely different thing for me. So I had the initial exposure, and then going to India for the first time is such a culture shock. You may be aware of this. It just grabs you, and then it's vibrant, and the people are great. There's the difference in standards is extraordinary. But it's a bit of I found Indian people to be so generous and so accommodating and just, it's a lot different now to what it was, 20 years ago. But how did I get exposed to India in terms of cricket, right? And I don't know how many times I've been there. Not as many as Brett Lee, but I've been there quite a few times. So coming back to the association, New South Wales Cricket. So you've got a chairman and you've got a president and so forth. And the chairman at that time, president was Alan Davison. Chairman was a guy by the name of Alan Crompton. Now, Alan Crompton, part of his role was to go to Victoria, to the cricket board, for the meetings down there, and then come back and report to the association. So we'd have these meetings at Barrack Street, and all the club directors with their delegates there, they'd all be there and so forth. And he's reporting on the usual stuff. The test match is going to be on this date. We play England on blah, blah, blah. Television, you're going to see it on free to air. And, oh, thank God for that. We've got to make sure it's on free to air. So there's all those sort of discussions and so forth. And then he said, and I'm pretty certain I'm the only person in the room that went, ding. He said something along these lines. Don't be surprised if world cricket at some point moves away from the UK and towards India. Now, that was a massive statement at that time, when you're dealing with a vibrant, dynamic group of guys that are producing cricketers. I went, my God, this is fair income, But other people just talked, So I come back and we're dealing with the staff the next day, my team. It's not a good sound, is it? But the people, said, this is what was said. I'm telling you now, this is what was said. This is where world cricket's going to go, right? Put that in the back of your brain. Start thinking about it. Start developing ideas. Start putting it out there, letting people know that this is what we're going to do, right? New South Wales Cricket is going to go to India. In those days, only the national team went, right? So we started to think about that. And then through New South Wales again and through connections and so forth, I even went to the boss at the time, and I think it was David Gilbert at that time, Brian Friedman, who was Brian Hughes, who was the CEO after Bob, had come on board, and he was very supportive. And I remember David saying, well, let's look at it, but it needs to be paid for. It needs to be sponsored. So, right, okay, you got me there, right? And at that time, we developed an association with a gentleman who was in charge of power education and ASBT, or I think it was called. And he was an Indian gentleman. And he's saying, how do we make this happen? And I'm thinking, are you serious? He's going, yes, we'll make that happen. So in 2004, we took our NSWIT's Colts team to India for the first time. So in that tour was guys like Dan Smith, Ben Rower, Stephen O'Keefe, Sean Bradshaw, these guys, young guys who hadn't yet made their mark in the first class cricket, but have made their mark. They're all involved in cricket now still. And so off they went. Now, the good thing about that was 2 years later, the New South Wales team, there was this World Challenge, Challenge Cup or something. The senior guys went and played in India and they won. It was a $2.8 million bonus for New South Wales.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
Now, I'm not taking any credit. Don't get me wrong. But if you've been to India, you've actually got to get used to it. And some people don't. Some people go, oh, this is too hard. But you've got to embrace it, And to go over there and win that, and for these guys to have had experience there and then go over and win, it's fine. So that was our first, as a New South Wales thing. And about a year later, we took a couple of spinners, Ryan Medley from Wagga, Sam Robson from University of New South Wales at that time. Sam now Aitman's batting for Middlesex. He's had a 15-year career. I saw him score his 3,800 when I was in England recently. So that was that. And then, of course, okay, what else can we do? Let's take our youth teams. So, let's take our youth men's teams, our boys' teams, and let's take our women's teams. So we did that. So in that men's team was, Adam Zampa and Nick Maddinson. In the women's team was Ellyse Healy, Alyssa Healy and Ellyse Perry. And of course they both have huge profiles in now.
Okay. Yeah.
Ellyse has been injured there for a while, but Ellyse Healy, Ellyse Perry, I should say, has a huge profile in the IPL over there. They absolutely love her. She's a great player, as we all know. But yeah, and from there, look, going back a stage before that. So you want me to mention, for example, the IPL?
Yes, please. Okay. Well, that's big business, remember, right?
Well, it is. It's one of about the 5th highest grossing sport in world cricket now.
Yeah. So they invited you to give them advice.
What had happened was we'd gone over there in 2000. That was 2008. We took the men and women, and I must mention Rod Marsh here. Rod was at the National Academy, and he gave me a bit of guidance because he'd taken the National Academy there. So, okay, let's New South Wales Cricket. We're going there as well. Anyhow, so we'd organise it. We're staying at Chinnaswamy Stadium. Rajesh Patel, who was the, he's on the BCCI, which is the national body, but also he was involved with Karnataka State, which is Bangalore, right there. And we're staying at Chinnaswamy Stadium. And the IPL broke. It was like broke, and it became a thing within about a week or so. And all of a sudden it's happening. The first game's at Chinnaswamy Stadium. Yeah. We've got rooms booked. And I ring up. I said, what are we going to do, mate? He said, no worries, come over and I'll give you tickets to the first game. So we're there for the first game. You've got the IPL teams are made up of, these great Indian players owned by Bollywood superstars, right? Bollywood's like 10 times bigger than Hollywood.
Okay.
At one stage, I remember Shah Rukh Khan, who's a great Bollywood actor, saying 47 million people go to the theatre every day in India. 47 million. Now, that was back before streaming and so forth. But so you had Bollywood, great Indian players, great international stars, and then, some other people within the group. And that was the first game. And that was the night Brendan McCullum scored 159 off 70 balls, and it just blew world cricket apart. And that's what happened from there.
Yeah.
And then from there, in the association there, you're talking about me personally.
Yeah.
So still at New South Wales Cricket, we had owners of these franchises coming to our offices and saying, how do we do things? Like we're superstar Bollywood actors. How do we, and we've got coaches and so forth, but, how do you identify talent? How do you identify talent? And what do you do to develop it? What's the model? How do you find coaches? What do you do with coaches? That's the model. Umpires, curators, lots of different things. What is talent? What sort of things do you do? And so that led to an association with some of these people. And at the same time, Neil Maxwell, who was Brett Lee's manager, was made CEO of the Kings 11 Punjab, which is up at Mahali there, Chandigarh. He then introduced me to the owners, which at that time was Priti Zinta. Now, Priti Zinta is still involved, beautiful Bollywood actress. Ness Wadia, who's no longer there. And so I had a consultancy role for, an advisory role, building models, building, business models, not business models in terms of how do you make money, but business models in terms of, identifying talent and all that sort of stuff I've already mentioned. So I did that, and then I did some work over there in identifying, because you had your great Indian players, your international players. I mean, we had Yuvraj Singh, Sreesanth, Priyas Chawla, we had Brett Lee, we had Mahela Jawadena for Sri Lanka, Kumar Sangakkar, just fabulous people. But you had to have an element of Indian players as well that weren't these superstars. So it was my role to go over there and run the talent ID programs and sort out who we could contract. because, there was a little bit of nepotism going on and,
Yes.
so that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the owners knew that, this, so I did that. And then I think the second year, the head coach was Tom Moody from WA, and Trevor Penny was his assistant, and I was the high performance manager. And Tom couldn't be there so Trevor and I'd go and we'd run the pre-tournament camps. We'd run for about 6 or 7 days. And I remember we ran the first game in Bangalore as well before Tom came over. He might have arrived during the game, but we did that. So it's, associated with those players and working with those players. And from there, my more recent association through those contacts with Roger Binney, who's now president of the BCCI, I've done quite a lot of coach education over there, upskilling and coaching coaches as well. So my most recent assignment there was in Assam, right up the north near the China border. Ran some courses up there last year for about 100 people. And then prior to that, we did some work through Ross Turner, who used to be at New South Wales Cricket and is now a good friend of mine. And he's we did some coach. We did a course with the coaches at the Six Academy, which is Roll Dravid's academy, which was really interesting because he came along and he met and he said, how do you do this? And terrific person. So that's my association with Indian cricket.
You're still very passionate about it, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great, because the thing about coaching and teaching is that their culture is such that teachers are respected, coaches are respected. So you have that respect until you lose it, and you lose it if you're not respectful.
Okay.
So that makes coaching and teaching not easy, but it's a really valuable experience when you've got people like that and you're working with people like that.
Yeah.
Here it's a little bit harsher. You've got to earn respect.
Yeah.
And in some cases, some areas I have, and some other cases I haven't. So that's just the way it is here. So, but yeah, that's India for me. Mm.
And I'm laughing because you were worried at the start about you may not be able to talk a lot in terms of, the content that we're running over. So I'm going to divert it slightly because you've had the most wonderful corporate career, which is very relevant to our audience as well in terms of the people in the IT game. Tell us about the work that you do with corporations in terms of, coaching, team building, mentoring. Yeah. Give us a couple of examples. Let's give you a plug.
I love working in the corporate environment because it's quite similar in a lot of ways. You've got high achieving people. You've got people who want to learn, people who want to better themselves, people want a direction, people want to know how to do things better. So I remember I did a course with, not a course, but a stint with PricewaterhouseCoopers back in the day to the sales team, their national sales team, high performing people. But it was about creating change and high performance. That was the topic. So I was able to talk about how we took the environment that I was working in, let's call it kitchen table, to world's best practice. What did we need to do? What questions do we ask ourselves? And how did we go about that? How did we set our dream? How did we set our vision? How did we set our targets? Who did we have to convince? How do we do that? And there's a method of doing that. How do you convince people? So one of my theories is that you need to convince people of the value of something, not the cost of it.
Yes.
So, for example, if you go to the board and say, I want to employ a video analyst, they say, how much is it going to cost? So you've got to go to the board with something else, something different. And I remember when we were looking to employ Troy, and I'd had some, discussions with, I'd invite Steve Waugh in, for example, or Mark Taylor, people who were in and around the programs, and say, well, how do you see it? How do you see us operate? What are you seeing? What do we need to do better? And I remember Steve Waugh said, how long do we want to be behind Queensland cricket? I went, it's a really good point, because Queensland cricket were leading the way at that time, right? Whether we liked it or not, they were, So in my proposal, it wasn't about we need to employ this person that's going to cost this amount of money. My question to the group, my answer down the track, my question to the group was, gentlemen, I'm talking to the board. How long do we want to remain behind Queensland cricket? So that was the initial question. It wasn't about whatever else happened after that. Wasn't in their heads. It was about that.
Yes,
that's what they had answered.
Yeah.
So that's what the corporates are looking for. So I think they're looking for.
Yeah.
And then the engagement with that is about, well, this is how we do things. Why did you? And I often use Ray McLean a little bit. Ray McLean was a former military guy who then came out and worked in the sporting industry, and he asked questions for change. How are we seen as an organisation? Or how are we seen when we train? How are we seen when we're out having for dinner? Then the second question is, how do you want to be seen?
Yes.
And that throws up lots of, because most people just do a SWOT analysis, and oh, Jesus, and then what do we need to do that? And so I love exchanging, I really enjoy that exchange with people.
Let me ask you this then. What do you do away from work? What sort of hobbies have you got for you to relax?
Well, I like sport, so, engage in sport. I watch sport, and so forth. But I actually love the arts.
Okay.
I love going to the theatre. I love live performances. I love ballet, which is an interesting one. People might ask, why is that? So that's what I like to do.
Well, then you'll have to give your son a plug first of all, and then we can give everybody else a plug. Tell everybody about your son and your family generally.
Well, it's worked out, even though I've been involved in sport all my life, my children, even though they're good at sport, are mainly in the arts. So I've got 3 children. They're all in the arts. And this basically comes from my wife originally, who was a childhood actor, went back in the day. She starred in a movie, French movie, way back in the day. So, I was exposed to it, and I loved it. But my son is my middle child. So he was a really good cricketer and a talented soccer player, but he always chose ballet. And I remember when he's 5 years of age, I said to him, mate, what do you want to do on the weekend? We thought he'd say, footy or whatever. And he said, ballet. And I went, oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do ballet. Think it was going to be a year. But down the track, when he's 15, he's off to the Royal Ballet School. Off he goes, goes to the Royal Ballet School and becomes, down the track, we'll keep this short, he becomes principal dancer at the Royal Ballet in London. He's now retired, but you don't become a principal ballet dancer at the Royal if you're not good. So he's one of the best ballet dancers of his generation.
Yes.
And I'm proud to say that. So, whilst he was a terrific cricketer, but that's what he does. He's now retired. He's now the artistic director of the RAD, which is the Royal Academy of Dance. It's a global organisation that oversees ballet worldwide. It's in 88 countries.
Yes.
So we talk regularly now about management and leadership and all that sort of stuff. So, but I have 2 other children. So Ariane's the eldest. She's a singer-songwriter. She performs in Sydney. She performed in Melbourne. She's performed in New York. She's performed in London. She has she actually has 2 law degrees, but she's written plays. She's performed in New York that she's done. She's got an acting degree from the Academy of Dramatic Art in New York.
Yes.
So she's into that.
Just a family
fabulous.
Brimming with talent.
Well, I was the oldest roadie in Sydney for many years. So it's great going to see him perform. Great to see Alexander dance. I would never have been to the Royal Opera House apart from that. And then I have a younger daughter, Amelia, who also has an acting degree from the Actors Centre here in Sydney.
Yeah.
She's a performer, singer, dancer, actor. She's performed in Sydney. Yeah, she's had 2 Sydney, New York, London. She has production. She has her own production company. She's put on shows in all those big cities. She's put shows on at the Edinburgh Festival.
Okay.
She's done that. And her most recent thing, she's branched out into burlesque. So she's up there doing the stuff in burlesque.
Yes.
So they're all, so what, as them growing up, my hobbies would be go and see them perform. Now I follow them, I watch sport, and that's
I'm going to hit you with the final question of the
Yes.
day, which is, what advice have you got for young people when they're starting out? And I'm going to say either in a sporting or in a tech industry or career.
I say hasten slowly. Get in there. If you get the role, get in there and have a real crack. But don't expect, it's rare talent that goes to the top straight away. Don't expect you're going to be CEO within 6 months, right? Take your time. Look, learn, watch, study people, listen, work out who are the high achievers and who aren't. Well, there's the monitor of, I won't say bullshit, but there's a situation there that you work out this person's going here, this person's going there. What can I do to improve myself? Ask questions. Make sure you're available. Ask questions and provide solutions for your upline boss.
Yes.
Be engaged. Show some passion.
You've obviously been very passionate all through your career. Now, have you enjoyed that?
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I'm just going to thank Alan. That gentleman is the great Alan Campbell, one of the premier cricket coaches, not just in Australia, but in the world. Also does a lot of corporate work. We'll put his details on our LinkedIn profile and on YouTube, but he's certainly available. And he's done a lot of great work in the corporate space, which we haven't covered off today, because once you get him talking about his passion for people, he could go for hours, which I've enjoyed immensely. John Waters, Inspiring Careers. We shall see you next month. Okay, bye.